bear with me, but we are in very unusual times, and I have some things I would like to say to councillors and to all our residents. So I'd like to address this to our residents right across the entire district. Yesterday, a noted economist sent me a prediction that our district-wide economy will shrink by 40% as a result of the downstream effects of COVID-19 lockdown. By a massive margin, we will be the most detrimentally affected district in New Zealand. Coupled to that, our unemployment rate is predicted to reach somewhere between 25 and 30%. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that these are sobering and chilling facts of the reality before us. Literally in little over a month, we have gone from being New Zealand's most successful district with a growing population and a growing GDP to potentially one of the poorest districts in Aotearoa. I'll come back to the effect on our people later, but the sad and harsh reality is that the cold breath of what has struck us now will be felt for years to come. Many in our community understandably worry about their future in the district. Regrettably, we are likely to see a migration of some of our younger people away from the district simply through lack of job opportunities. We have a massive task before us. It is a task that we must undertake together. The time for squabbles over matters that are no longer relevant is gone. For a very long period of time, growth will cease to be a subject for discussion, and instead our mantra must be survival. So where to from here? Next week, we will move from complete lockdown to level 3. I doubt that this will make a lot of difference to most of us. That will most likely come when level 2 is declared, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time. Our concentration at this time must go into how we recover, how we ensure there is a meal on the table for those who can no longer provide for their families, and how an adequate level of support is provided for those in real trouble within our community. We are a resilient mix of communities, though. I remind you that most of us moved here, most of us have moved here, because we understandably fell in love with the district. That will not cease simply because of the wall of problems that we now face. Our community is very much based on the tourism economy. Many in our community, and I count myself as one of those, look to a future where we are no longer so dependent on tourism. We must diversify our economy. We must also consider the negative side of global tourism and the concern for the effects of mass tourism on our communities and on our environment. In the future, we will do things differently. However, our immediate concern right now must focus on getting our economy moving to ensure those in our community have an income. I have asked councillors for their support for council to be the catalyst to form 2 task forces. One concentrating on community recovery and ensuring we look after the vulnerable. The other will focus on economic recovery. In forming these task forces, I intend to enlist the help of one of our district's greatest resources. That is, some of the marvelously big brains we are fortunate to have in our midst. This work will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. As I've said, our economy is based on tourism. In the immediate future, we will need to do all we can to encourage visitors here. The international markets will be some time in returning, but given that last year, 30% of our visitor mix was domestic, we need to do all we can to welcome Kiwis here. Likewise, we are interested in the work being done to create a Trans-Tasman bubble, provided we can be sure our Aussie cousins are as clear of COVID-19 as we are. which may introduce our second largest market. Other offshore markets will not recover for some time, and even when they do, may not be anything like the volumes of the past. So while we desire to see change in the future, the partial recovery of our tourism industry must be our main short-term goal. In addition, Council has, along with many others in the district, asked government for assistance to undertake and support some of its shovel-ready projects in the Queenstown Lakes area. This work has the triple intention of getting some of the major infrastructure projects we have sought for years underway, providing an economic boost to our community and creating jobs. I have a high level of confidence that government is listening to us, and we are likely to have their support for these projects. These are difficult times for us all, some more so than others. I say again that recovery from the ground zero position in which we currently find ourselves requires the combined and concentrated effort of us all. I look forward to working with you to see our district return to prosperity. I now wish to address some comments to those involved in dealing with the current crisis. Nearly 5 weeks ago, this council activated the Emergency Operations Centre and the Wanaka Incident Control Centre with a large team drawn from across QLDC's many functions and increasingly with support from other individuals, volunteers, and organisations in the district. Since then, they have been working 7 days a week to provide community messaging and advice, to maintain a constant stream of intelligence and data, to plan for the best and worst case scenarios, and to source essential services and supplies. Looking further out, the QLDC recovery team has been meeting with the Ministry of Social Development, Immigration New Zealand, and Embed weekly to brief them on the situation and seek additional support. I have personally engaged with central government at every possible opportunity and at all levels to make our unique case. But without doubt, the welfare team response has been unprecedented. As of 9 a.m. this morning, we have received 8,422 requests for welfare support via our online registration portal on the QLDC website. Approximately 3/4 of this number are in New Zealand on employment visas, and 1/4 have dependents or other family members requiring support. The most common requests are for food or grocery essentials, 80%, and housing or rental support, 20%. There are also smaller numbers seeking bedding, clothing, and help with utility and medical costs. The most common reason for food requests is to enable people to use what little money they have to pay other bills. Many people are accruing rental debt or depleting their meagre personal savings to sustain their current living situation. And I can tell you from listening to the Mayoress, who was a volunteer making these calls, there are some truly heart-wrenching stories of hardship. Queenstown Lakes has a significant population of migrant workers, many of whom are newly unemployed as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown and not eligible for government support due to their visa status. The migrant workers are a key part of the economy and the community in the district, and the continued stress which they are currently living is having a wide-reaching effect. When restrictions on movement are loosened, some of those able to leave Queenstown Lakes will do so. However, we believe that their significant need for support will remain as options to find work in tourism and hospitality are limited globally. All of these underline how important the work of the emergency response team, and in particular the welfare team, has been and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. This is our community in need, and I'm proud to see how this district is pulling together to support each other. This is an outstanding community spirit and kindness that I hope we will see maintained long into the future. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you who has been part of this response and recovery teams, staff and volunteers alike. There are too many of you to name individually, but you know who you are and the genuine difference you have made in this country's fight against COVID-19 and to the lives of those individuals and families in need. You have worked so hard over the last month and given so much of yourselves. There is a long road ahead to get through, but I know you're up to the task, and together as a community, we will get through this. Kia kaha katoa. Thank you. We now move to public forum. As of 2 p.m. yesterday, we received 88 comments for public forum today. While not all are lengthy, if we extrapolate out 3 minutes per comment, we would be looking at an utterly untenable and unrealistic amount of time, potentially in excess of 4 hours. Under the circumstances, we needed to apply some agility in these unprecedented times. I yesterday agreed to a fair approach that I will now outline. Councillors have received all comments in full yesterday for review. Today, we will group the comments by subject. We will read every name, organisation if appropriate, and key points. The order will be the order in terms of timing of receipt of the comments, with the exception of differing subjects. The comments will be supplied to the media in full. I realise that for some in our community, this is not ideal, but we are adapting in the circumstances. Thank you to all of you who took the time to share your thoughts with us before this meeting. Stacey Harris will now read the summary.
Kia ora koutou katoa. The following are the summarised comments received for public forum. Statement of intent. Jonathan Holmes. Needs to reflect innovative approach providing more climate-friendly services, including hub of electrified domestic transport and localised drone freight distribution. Anna McKell, Queenstown Chamber of Commerce. Statement of intent has recently caused strong divisions in the community. Reasonable, legal, pragmatic and approach to delay significant longer-term decisions. Allow QAC to focus on sustaining a business through COVID-19. Allow QLDC to focus on social and economic recovery. David Mayhew, Kelvin Peninsula CA. Believes that the course proposed in the council report is both irrational and in default of the principles of open, transparent and democratically accountable conduct, prudent stewardship and sustainable development. Agrees that an amended SOI is required and that the existing business and plan and financial projects have been rendered meaningless. Submits that the circumstances the council should modify its February statement of expectations, asking QAC to reconsider its draft SOI and resubmit as soon as practicable. Roy Smith, local ratepayer, business owner and employer, feels local views are not being listened to regarding the airport and does not trust the process of changing the SOI at a later date. States that Auckland International Airport has, within 2 weeks, updated its budgeting for future post-COVID and that it is unreasonable for QAC to insist it cannot do the same within 2.5 months. If the SOI is redundant, it should be changed now to avoid future allegations of a done deal. Robbie Caldwell. Let the public have a voice on the SOI and do not force it through under the cover of COVID-19. Miranda Sperry. The proposal should not be rushed through while the community is in lockdown. The SOI had no support from the community when it was drafted pre-COVID-19. Believes the impact assessments must demonstrate the opposition to the proposal and sees no reason for it to be pushed through now. Sarah Bogle. As a Frankton ratepayer, asked councillors to reject this draft SOI, stating more realistic estimates are required for visitor numbers and community impacts. This is a time for innovative thinking about the region's economy. The airport should be developing a low carbon model to support low impact, local tourism and increased local production of high value goods and services. Thomas Bongers disagrees that projected airport extension of Queenstown Airport, especially with tourism projected to be in recession for years. Projections for the next 3 years stemming from before the COVID-19 pandemic are irrelevant and should invalidate all binding agreements on this matter. Di Fitzgerald, financial forecasts and growth-orientated objectives are now irrelevant. The statement is also supposed to consider the social and economic impact assessments on the community. Councillors should not agree to the draft SOI. Jenny Hughes, QAC should be directed to update the draft SOI by the mid-year deadline to make it relevant in light of COVID-19. Revenue has virtually stopped whilst nearly 200 million debt liabilities remain. Louis Martin, lived in Wakatipu just over 10 years and lives here because of the outdoors and environment. Does not agree in any increase to airport traffic noise now or in the future. Believes Invercargill should become the airport with greater international capacity given its accessibility for other locations such as Tiano and Milford. Sally Miller states that the current draft SOI should be updated by QAC and brought back to Council in July to reflect the current environment and uncertainty of the next 3 years as best they can. Nikki Tompkins recommends that the Council should receive the draft, not a final SOI, and QAC to revise it with regard to community feedback already received, the effects of international tourism, creation of further debt, environmental considerations, and the Martin Jenkins airport impact assessments. Accepting the SOI now will imply support for future expansion. The community needs investment in infrastructure for 3 waters, waste management, emission-free transport, well-built affordable housing, and medical and cultural facilities. Zara Kingsbury believes that it is inappropriate to pass the pre-lockdown document without making changes to reflect the current changes and plan for an uncertain future. States we should not have to wait another 7 months for QAC to devise its survival strategy, especially as Auckland International Airport has already agreed and published theirs. Support suggestions that QAC should be directed to modify the SOI by 30th of July. Linda Baker states now is not the time for rush decisions and councillors should take time to see what matters to the locals. Simon Small states the process should be paused and more time taken to hear community input and clear guidance regarding the SOI. Julie Brock questions the need for constant expansion and growth and believes actions are driven by economic considerations, only not the preservation or best interests of Queenstown. Matthew Parker doesn't believe the council needs to agree to the draft SOI and that they should hold QAC to the delivery date of 30th of July. Kim Pettigrew. 2 public surveys clearly state a majority of the community don't want airport expansion. States the councillors should be more focused on important issues surrounding the pandemic. Madeline Zoy states agreeing to the SOI implicitly agree to growth objectives and strategies, including expansion to air noise boundaries. Should be treated as a draft SOI and councillors should ask QAC to bring back a final SOI that reflects the uncertainties of the next 3 years as accurately as can be by 30th of July. Joanne Potts. Don't make any premature decisions given the economic impact of COVID-19 on New Zealand and Queenstown. Michael Spencer. No expansion to the Queenstown Airport as we are already overwhelmed with tourism. The current circumstances give a chance to have a more controlled tourist industry here. Danielle. States the legal process allows for QAC to return an updated SOI in a few more months. Adopting the current SOI may give argument that the dual airport strategy and noise boundary changes were approved, so reject the proposal and push for a corrected document. Josie Seidemann. The draft SOI is not relevant and neither are its forecasts and objectives. QLDC should direct QAC to return a final SOI by 30th of July that reflects current uncertainties as accurately as possible and reflects community feedback. Jane Shearer. The statement does not reflect the community's concerns, not the current context. Does not believe it needs to be adopted for compliance purposes. Ask QAC to deliver an updated SOI. Louise Lockwood. Does not agree that expansion of air noise boundaries at Queenstown Airport. States our community doesn't want it and our environment can't cope with it. Kristen O'Sullivan Perrin. Recommends that the council should receive the draft, not a final SOI, and QAC to revise it with regard to community feedback already received, the effects of international tourism, creation of further debt, environmental considerations, and the Martin Jenkins Airport impact assessments. Accepting the SOI now will imply support for future expansion. The community needs investment in infrastructure for three waters, waste management, emission-free transport, well-built affordable housing, and medical and cultural facilities. Tim Jackson. Disappointed in the proposal and the process and believes it does not represent the community in a fair, honest, and transparent manner. Agreeing to this SOI is agreeing to the objectives and strategies, including air noise boundary expansion in Queenstown. States now is the time for QLDC and QAC to develop objectives and strategies in consultation with the community and other stakeholders, taking a greenfields approach. Ari Kleinjan. Auckland International Airport updated its survival strategy in 2 weeks. Why does QAC need 7 months? Councillors should instruct QAC to bring back an updated SOI in July. Liz Matheson. Life will not be back to normal once we reach levels 2 or 1, so we need to think about our new normal. Does not support the SOI is adopted at this time. Jeff Hunt. Councillors should not agree the SOI based on pre-COVID demands and forecasts. Wayne Cafe. The SOI should be treated as a draft and QAC instructed to bring back a final SOI in July. Jeff Desbecker. QLDC should act in a more controlling, directing, and leading position rather than the regarding the SOI, and should reflect the desires of the district's population. The SOI should be treated as a draft and QAC instructed to bring back a final SOI in July. Brian Wrighton. The SOI is now defunct and we need new objectives and strategies. Extend the deadline to 30th of July so the SOI should not be agreed on. Sarah Russell. Concerned about transparency and pushing ahead with a dated and irrelevant SOI considering the COVID crisis and decimation of tourism. The council is not taking the wishes of the community into account. Robin and Marilyn Armstrong. The SOI should be treated as a draft and QAC instructed to bring back a final SOI in July. Rabina Bodal. These are unprecedented times and we should be using this as an opportunity to get it right for the future. Does not believe the future includes numerous international jets at Queenstown Airport. Tourism will be less quantity and more quality. The SOI should be treated as a draft and QAC instructed to bring back a final SOI in July. Nick Clark. Believes making well-informed decisions on where we go and how we manage our resources cannot be done in the present lockdown restrictions. Implores councillors to reject the proposal to accept the SOI. Laura Wrighton. Believes ratepayers won't benefit from pushing the acceptance of the SOI, stating that it is the role of councillors to represent the community and their best interests. Reject the SOI and bring a new one back in 6 months' time. We don't need to increase the size of the airport and need to look at a new way of living that doesn't depend on over-tourism. Excuse me. Jill Castles. Accepting the SOI implies agreement with the objectives of noise boundary expansion. The community needs investment in infrastructure and planning responsive to human needs. This is a multi-generational opportunity to reset the values of the community and diversify the economy. The SOI should be treated as a draft and QAC instructed to bring back a final SOI in July. Nikki Martin. Now is not the time to pass the SOI. Wait until June or July with the chance to see the results of the Martin Jenkins assessments. The proposed SOI is based on a world that no longer exists and should be rejected. Philippa Archibald. Recommends that the council should receive the draft, not a final SOI, and QAC to revise it with regard to community feedback already received, the effects of international tourism, creation of further debt, environmental considerations, and the Martin Jenkins Airport impact assessments. Bill and Kirsty Sharp. States that the council does not accept the SOI and asks QAC to bring back a plan by the end of June. This can include information from Martin Jenkins and the spatial plan. The statement of expectations should also be updated. Dividends of QLDC are in the past. Ian Moore does not believe QLDC or QAC have explained the legal implications of accepting the SOI, nor understand why QAC should be given until October to deliver future intentions. Even pre-COVID, the SOI was subject to community opposition, and accepting it now will heighten distrust, so urges QLDC not to accept the SOI. Now is an opportunity to diversify away from tourism, urges councillors to consider all items in terms of greatly changed economy. Trish and Paul Fraser, opposed to the recommendation to agree the SOI, believes there should be sufficient capability within QAC to return a revised SOI by 30th of June. Accepting this SOI means there's nothing to stop QAC continuing with capital investment that's not needed, as passenger volumes were already declining before COVID-19. Lot 6 should be returned to Alastair Porter. Brian Hughes. Never has council had an opportunity like this to guide the residents and companies of Queenstown to a greener, more sustainable future. Council needs to be demanding a short-term survival strategy from QAC this week. Refuse to accept their long-term plan. Councillors need to push for a start to their own longer-term plan forward. Putting a series of outside-the-box ideas on the table for consultation. John Hillhorst disagrees with the premise that QLDC's acceptance of the SOI affects QAC's capacity to comply with its legal requirements. The SOI does not reflect the best reasonable outlook, expectations and goals of the business, and does not meet the requirements of the Act. Recommends that the council should not agree to the SOI. Sally Stockdale urges councillors not to receive the SOI and require the QAC resubmit a new SOI on or before the 30th of July. Needs a fundamentally different approach, focusing on how QAC can best serve the community in a new world. Economic impacts from COVID-19 may significantly change the public needs of our airport and community at large. Accepting the current SOI may result in an investment in a fragile future that may now be impossible to realise. Paul Vaitkus, disappointed the subject of expanding noise boundaries for Queenstown Airport are still being considered, especially at a time of such crisis. Michael, understands it's not legal or good governance to accept the SOI. Jay Cassells, supports other comments submitted that oppose the SOI being accepted, should learn from lessons before us in these unique circumstances. Pre-existing opposition is now augmented by wishes to reset. Need to focus on community wellbeing and economic diversification. John Guthrie, now is not the time to approve or accept new works at the airport proposed before the pandemic. The lockdown has created an erosion of residential and commercial wealth in Queenstown. Need to reassess our future. We want quality, not quantity. Michael Hanna, councillors must comply with the wishes of residents and the requirements of good governance. Agreeing the SOI contradicts this trust. Sally Curry is against accepting the SOI. Need to plan for a better, more sustainable future for tourism and encourage people to move to our area. Consult with the community on the future and ensure the results are integrated into any future plans. Rosemary Barnett objects to the proposal to approve the SOI. QAC should review its scope of activities and performance targets through a post-COVID lens. Take the option to bring the SOI back once revised at the end of July. Need a new reality based on diversity and that yields to human and community values. Dave Bergman states sources and saying tourism and airport expansion are going to be seriously slowed or stopped, and that's good as the town doesn't need 5 million visitors. Believes the process is flawed and that QAC should be sent back to the drawing board. QLDC should listen to the people and not accept this SOI. Don and Heather Wallace. Concerned COVID-19 is being used to accept the SOI. Enjoying restored peace and quiet in Frankton and the Wakatipu Basin. QLDC should reflect and accept that peace and tranquility is part of what the Wakatipu Basin has to offer. Ask councillors to pause and reflect. Fraser Skinny. Accepting the SOI would be agreeing to air noise boundary expansion. Suggests not the time to make decisions on a highly contentious nature. Be mindful of public views and act responsibly. Bill Taylor urges to vote against adopting the SOI. Says adopting would be a disservice to ratepayers and that this is an opportunity to listen to communities and think about the future of tourism. Do the right thing, not the easy thing, and vote at least to tear this as a draft to be further modified. Victoria Hanrahan. Councillors should not agree to SOI, including air noise boundary expansion. While everyone is dealing with their own personal situation and such decisions need to have more community awareness. Queenstown can't cope with the infrastructure, traffic and parking, and more people coming into Queenstown puts people at risk. Kathy Leake. Surprise, the airport expansion is still on the agenda. The key to economic recovery is not the airport getting bigger or opening longer. Council should not accept the draft. Stand up for Queenstown's future. Brian and Marion Marquand. Council, as a 75.01% shareholder, can require the QAC to begin addressing reality and survival now, even if only to produce a better draft to be finalised in October. QLDC should reject the SOI and a more relevant document be created. Andrea Brooks. Don't give QAC permission to do whatever they like by agreeing the SOI. Having listened to your community's voices, it's obvious this draft SOI must not be approved today. Christine Johnson. Don't accept, but instead receive SOI to consider community feedback, COVID and MJ report. Grant Hardy. By agreeing to the SOI, you agree to growth objectives and strategies the SOI contains, including air noise boundary expansion at ZQN. Don't do it. Annette Fruin. Not okay for council to accept a patently absurd SOI for the sake of administrative ease. Erin Taylor. Supportive of the long-term planning being placed on hold. Don't agree with the need to proceed with the Project Pathways project, particularly in light of the current economic uncertainty. Understand the airport has applied funding from central government for shovel-ready projects to expand the airport when money should go to other things. Decline and review a new one in July. Andrew Donaldson. Unanimously reject this motion because in these traumatic times, council has to restore the trust of its electorate. Noel Van Wicken. If council agrees to the draft SOI in its current form, then it is agreeing to the SOI's growth-orientated objectives, including air noise boundaries expansions at Queenstown. Martin Jenkins' report should be made public first. Better if we could move forward with a positive, robust and relevant SOI. COVID is a moment in time to go outside and not hear any noise. Hannah Clouds. Seek that the draft SOI be declined on the basis that Project Pathway is a backdoor to increase airport growth and passenger numbers. Kat West. SOI is simply not fit for purpose unless takes COVID and community consultation into account. Concerned accepting to proceed with capital expansion projects. If there is no benefit or hidden agenda to accepting the SOI now, then you should delay it and get it right. Alison Swintz. Do not accept this SOI. It is erroneous. Please ask for a new draft SOI. The statement of intent should be to gain understanding of the significant impact of COVID-19. Require community consultation on the QAC's SOI. Marnie Reid. Are you sliding SOI in by stealth? Decent-minded councillors won't sign. Blaze and Sarah Barham. Councillors should not agree to QAC's draft SOI as it is obviously no longer relevant. This is a chance to focus on industries outside of mass tourism to help create an environmentally friendly town. Also a chance to rethink our local tourism industry with a focus on higher paying tourists with less environmental impact. Greg Cowles from the Wanaka Stakeholders Group. Speaking on behalf of 3,390 members, opposition to QAC's statement of intent being accepted, adopted, or otherwise confirmed in its current state. There is sufficient time and there are people at QAC to enable a fresh, short, and accurate SOI to be produced. Wayne Allen. Strongly disagree with the QAC request for extensions for growth of the number of flights in and out of Queenstown. Please refuse the statement of intent by QAC. Colin Forster. Supports requesting a full and final SOI that reflects the actual times we're living in post-COVID-19. Peter Jackson, Frankton Community Association. Understand that this course of action will enable the airport company to direct its attention to respond to the immediate crisis and focus on developing a modified SOI for consideration by 31st October 2020. FCA agrees that this course of action is acceptable and will enable a more accurate and up-to-date SOI to be debated later in the year. That it does not support any increase in the noise boundaries or expansion of the Queenstown Airport site for the foreseeable future. Mary Louise Kingsbury. By doing this, you would effectively be agreeing to the QAC's growth objectives and strategies that the SOI contains, including air noise boundary expansion. Do not unwittingly agree to unwanted growth objectives and strategies. Manu Sinclair. Direct QAC to modify the statement of intent by July 30th. Time to reset our vision of the tourism industry, moving forward to a more sustainable approach. Anna Van Wicken. If Council agrees to the draft SOI in its current form, then it is agreeing to the SOI's growth-orientated objectives, including air noise boundary expansion at Queenstown. Queenstown community is strongly against expansion of air noise boundaries. Extend due date of the final SOI to the end of July and QAC would then have 3 months to do their job. You and Heather Rendell. Huge thanks to each of our councillors and mayor who've been working tirelessly. QAC's already formulated strategies provided predictions to their bank to gain additional funding and applied to the Crown implies they have already intentions of how they'll move forward. Don't agree to the QAC statement of intent. Doing so is irresponsible. John Burrell. Do not approve the current draft SOI as it is now irrelevant. Bring back a final SOI that reflects the uncertainties of the next 3 years as accurately as they can by July 30. Kath Gilmore, We Love Wakatipu. Do not agree to QAC's draft SOI, legally questionable under Schedule 8 of the Local Government Act as redundant. Delay would also mean the council sanctioned cone of QAC silence remains for 7 months post-lockdown. Direct QAC to come back by July 30th with a crisis survival and recovery skeleton SOI. Jane McCurdy. Do not approve the QAC SOI as it currently stands. It's not relevant. Don't need an even bigger airport in the middle of our valley. Don't need QAC to incur massive debt and in the process give more control to Auckland Airport. Do not approve shovel-ready projects for this town just because they are shovel-ready. Consider a more appropriate direction for the future. Infrastructure projects do little to provide much-needed jobs for the region. The water upgrade below RPS is pouring dirty water directly off our streets into the lake. Wendy Sherlock. Do not agree to the council signing of the QAC statement of intent or any of the objectives. Underhand that the council is not engaging enough with the community before making these decisions. Wanaka's urban traffic area boundary. Lyle Cox. Does not believe the recommendation is consistent with the outcome of the community engagement. States it is misleading to say the changes reflect current national good practice. Vicky Menzies. Does not believe the evidence supports lowering the speed limit. Suggests it is easy to slow traffic with other measures such as roundabouts and speed humps. COVID-19 response. Chris Scholes. Believes there has not been sufficient information provided to the community around the socio-economic crisis presented by COVID-19 and the government imposed travel restrictions. Considers it likely that the borders will not reopen until there is a vaccine, and this will have the most severe effect on the Southern Lakes region. believes there should be better communication about how council is responding to the crisis and should include a weekly update to the community, suggesting a virtual town hall meeting led by the mayor or chief executive. Darryl Rogers believes that a key component of a free market system is freedom. Notes that the Climate Action Plan and COVID-19 response are devoid of the freedom concept. Homeschooling demonstrates more freedom and flexibility as being experienced by many during lockdown, although homeschoolers receive a fraction of government funding. Parents at home with children build stronger communities. For Queenstown Lakes, imagine a destination that is not held hostage by the artificial inflexibility created by school holidays, such as accessing cheaper times to visit and decreased traffic peaks. And that is all from me. Thank you very much.
You're still muted, Jim, I think.
Apologies. Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate your good work in that regard. We now move to confirmation of the agenda. We require a resolution, and I will move that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Callum. I think in the interests of moving things right along, we'll take it that everyone agrees unless anyone signifies via the chat bar that they disagree. Thank you. We will call that carried. We now move to confirmation of minutes. We have two sets of minutes for adoption. And that the first, I will move that the minutes of the public part of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council held on the 12th of March 2020 be confirmed as a true and correct record. A seconder? Somebody second. Thank you, Callum. Again,
Jim, sorry, I had a comment in chat. I've just got one amendment, if that's possible.
Sure.
Thanks. So it's being a bit pedantic, but on page 8 of that item, or page 13 of the full document, it's under submission on report transforming the resource management system, and it's under point 7. Which starts on the previous page. There's just a line in there that said it was suggested that the need to embed the effects of climate change in the decision-making process be raised as an issue in the next round of consultation. What I actually asked for was to embed, not in those words, but the effects on climate change. Small but significant difference.
Sorry, just Nikki, point out exactly where you are.
Yeah, so it's page 8 of that item of the minutes, or page 13 of the document that councillors have that runs together. Point 7, and the item was submission on report transforming the resource management system. So it was the submission that we made, and we had a discussion on it, and it's in one of the last paragraphs on point 7, just before point 8. And the line was, it was suggested that the need to embed the effects of climate change in the decision-making process to be raised as an issue in the next round of consultation. So I raised that point, but I asked that the effects on climate change be considered because they are not considered under the RMA at present. And that was a comment to Mike, and I think Mike.
So the word you want, your word you want changed is on instead of of.
Of to on. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Thanks,
So with that small alteration, anybody have any objection to approving those minutes? Signify it, otherwise we will take them as approved. And the second resolution, and I'll move again that the minutes of the public part of the extraordinary meeting of Queenstown Lakes District Council held on the 16th of April 2020 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Seconder, thank you, Quentin. Again, anybody against? Thank you. We will take those as approved. Councillors, we now move to the first item on our agenda. Pardon me while I shuffle my pieces here, which is the Queenstown Airport Corporation Statement of Intent. So the report is written by Megan Miller. I also note that Adrian Young Cooper, the acting chair of the airport, Colin Keel, the chief executive of the airport, and Andrew Williamson, the chief financial officer of the airport, will be participating in the call. When I ask for comment from those parties, I will ask that standing orders be set to one side to enable them to speak, and then we will reinstate standing orders before councillors debate the issue. Obviously, we've just heard a number of comments put to us by the public, and I commend everyone for taking the time to make a comment. Perhaps having read the documents last night, the tone may have reflected a reversion to keyboard warrior than someone fronting us in person, but on the whole, the council and the community, and for that matter QAC, are all striving for the same thing. There's some great thinking in the comments and some real gems for QAC to consider. I do feel a little saddened, however, by some of the misunderstanding, particularly about expansion of the airport and the expansion of the noise boundaries, because that's simply off the agenda at the present time. And I can only surmise that having read some of the comments, that many had actually not read the agenda item at all, while others have chosen to listen to uninformed voices. And I hope today's debate will help you understand that. The QAC and all those associated with our airport have been literally decimated by COVID-19. And before us is simply a chance to place a line in the sand. Yes, the current SOI no longer reflects today's reality. And regardless of what other organisations may have achieved, the QAC has told us it clearly cannot have a meaningful modified SOI before us by July. They've asked that they be given the time to comprehend fully what their new business strategy will look like, and that is what we will now debate. However, before we get to that particular comment for Councillor Gladding, Nikki, some councillors have raised with me concern over whether you have a pre-declared position through your comments in the media, and whether that places you in a position where you cannot take part in the debate. Now, that is entirely for you to decide, but as it's been raised with me, I must raise it with you and ask you for your comments, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for that. No, look, I appreciate that. I think I'm well informed. I've read the financial statements, I've read the SOI, and my position remains open, and you'll understand that when I say what I need to say on this item. So as far as I'm concerned, no, I don't have a predetermined position on this. It will come down to what QAC is prepared to leave and or remove from that document. So I'll leave that to my comments later, but yeah, no, I'm not going to remove myself from the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gladding. Your assurance is accepted. Right, now we come to the actual item. Megan, do you have any comments you wish to make to open the item before we perhaps hear from the airport company?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm more than comfortable that the item stands, and I'm happy to take it as read at this point.
Thank you, Megan. Adrian Young Cooper, you are on the line, as is Colin, as is Andrew. Adrian, do you have anything you wish to state? And if you do, I will need to move that standing orders be set to one side while you speak. You there, Adrian?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just have a couple of opening comments.
All right, if I can hold you there, please. I'll move that standing orders be set to one side. Can I have a seconder?
I'm happy to
Thank you.
support that.
Thank you.
It's useful for them to be able to answer a question.
Okay, thank you, Quentin. Again, if anybody has an objection to that, please signal on the chat bar. Otherwise, we will set standing orders to one side while Adrian speaks. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Look, can I just acknowledge the very sobering comments which were made by the Mayor. I have been here for the entire council meeting, and certainly QAC finds itself in a very similar position to many other businesses and people in the Southern Lakes region. I've also had the benefit of hearing the summary of all of the issues which have been raised in the public forum, and I acknowledge the comments and the views which have been expressed, which are obviously to the council. So from the QAC perspective, we are right now in a COVID-19 world, and it will have a huge impact for some years on New Zealand, and particularly on this region. And QAC as an airport company, I'd just like to address a number of things, and I'm happy to answer any questions, as is Colin. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the short to medium term, and by that I mean medium term through to just even the end of this calendar year. And it is actually very significant that today there are no scheduled flights into Queenstown Airport. And under alert level 3, at this stage, there are no current scheduled flights. That may change, but that is the current outlook. And when scheduled flights do start again, they will be at a significantly lower level than we have had over the last few years, at least for quite a long period. Our revenues, of course, have been very significantly impacted by these events. We essentially are an airport company that relies upon air services and passengers, and there are no air services and there are no passengers. We have spent the last 6 weeks, we have been very focused, well before Alert 4 was declared. We have been focused on continuing to develop a range of scenarios about how this event may play out, how it impacts on the operation and the financial stability of QAC, and what we need to do in response to that to ensure that we have a strong, sustainable company coming out of this event, and we are positioned for recovery. We're a lifeline asset for the people of the Southern Lakes region. Right now we're focusing on trying to understand what the short to medium term future looks like. We are stabilising the business and changing the way that we do our business. We will be a smaller airport operation for a long time to come, because if you've just heard what the Mayor has said, we are very much a regional airport serving this region, and the economics and fundamentals of this region, we understand, have been significantly impacted by COVID-19. We need to, as we develop our new business strategy for this COVID-19 world, we need to work with the airlines We need to work with other partners at the airport, such as Airways, MPI, Customs. We need to work with the broader airport community and the people who actually own and run businesses inside the airport itself. This will take some time to understand just how these events and the significant change in the economy is going to impact on them. We will start detailed business planning in late June and July. And we do want to engage with the steering group that QLDC has established as early as August and certainly by September, so that we can talk with you and actually look at what some of the options are going forward for a significantly changed business. We have made it clear in the SOI that the expansion of noise boundaries is off the agenda, and there are significant pieces of work that we are waiting to be guided by, the spatial planning exercise and also the Martin Jenkins social and economic impact review. But notwithstanding those exercises which are being driven by the government and the council, we actually have a very, very significantly changed outlook. We commit to the fact that there will be no new capital projects commenced before a new SOI is accepted by the council. But I do want to identify that there was an expression of interest asked for by the government for any stimulus packages around the whole of New Zealand. They have, I understand, received about $100 billion worth of proposals, and there is an exercise going through now led by the government. The fact is that, we can talk a little bit about these projects, they're actually in our SOI. We do not have the capacity to actually commence those projects unless there was government support. In summary, the projects are an upgrade to the security screening area, which is required in terms of compliance with the legal requirements. And associated with that, there's an opportunity for some seismic strengthening. The airport is already over code, but this is just an opportunity to make the airport itself stronger, and some sustainability initiatives. None of those projects will be commenced without a new SOI being accepted by the council. But we just had a date to express a high-level request for government support. At this stage, we would not have the capacity to actually do those projects without government support. So I just wanted to, I didn't want there to be any suggestion that these were secret projects. They're not. They are in the SOI, and I have made a commitment to you, which I hope you have heard. I'm sorry, that's my rubbish truck. I'll just go off mute for a sec. And if I could just ask if, just for a moment, Mr. Mayor, if you, Colin may have one or two comments that he would like to make. Otherwise, we are open to answer any questions that councillors have.
Thank you, Adrian. Colin, have you got any comments you wish to make?
Only to say that the comments in the public forum regarding the SOI as it stands today and not being, if you like, relevant in a COVID-19 world, we accept, and that is why we put a significant piece in the introduction to the document to acknowledge that. I think the other thing that's really important is over the next couple months, we are very focused on our team and looking after their well-being as we have over the last many weeks. And our focus must be on that team for the next couple of months. I think it's also probably important to note that there were some comments with regard to the work that other airports have done over the last few weeks, it's important to recognize that the processes are very different companies for different purposes. And the SOI is a strategic document that looks out 3 years rather than a document that looks for immediate funding, if you like. So they are very different contexts in which forecasts will be done. That's really about it for me.
Thank you, Colin. Adrian, just to finish off now, I hope your rubbish truck is gone. And is there anything else you wish to say?
The rubbish truck is still doing its great business. But no, that covers off what I want to say. Look, we acknowledge all the comments which are made. And actually, the one thing I didn't say is that as the new business strategy in the COVID-19 world is developed and discussed and shared with our shareholders, we will of course communicate with the wider Southern Lakes region communities.
Thank you. So before we move to debate, councillors, and before we move back or reinstate standing orders, are there any questions for the Airport Corporation folk? Nikki, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I really appreciate those comments, Adrian, around the fact that you're not intending to spend any capital or borrow further for capital projects until there is a new SOI. And obviously, if the government was to stump up the funding for that, you'd be able to move ahead with the projects that remain in the capital program on the SOI, which is page 55, if anyone's looking at it. That is specifically what concerns me. And I don't think the document's fit for purpose. I don't think we need to approve it now. But if we could have an explicit statement in the SOI, not just invalidating the forecasts, which is what the disclaimer at the beginning does, if we could explicitly state that the company will not borrow any more money for capital projects, or could explain which projects it would spend on and which it wouldn't unless it got funding. If that could be set out, that would go a long way towards making me feel a lot better about this thing being approved now. So getting to the question, would the board be willing to put a statement to that effect in the SOI?
I'll just defer to Colin, but I think that some wording in the introductory statement that reflects what I've just said, Colin, we could take that back to the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've discussed at some length in workshops and the like, that is certainly our intention, except for critical works, obviously, in terms of repair and maintenance, which is the case. And obviously, unless there was some government funding or support that was provided through stimulus packages or the like.
Did I answer that question for you, Nikki?
It does. What would you need for that to happen? Because obviously, if we agreed to the SOI today as it stands, then that wouldn't occur. Or wouldn't necessarily occur. Would we be able to, would you be open to us not agreeing that, taking it back and making that small change, basically so that, you know, there is no spending until we get a new SOI?
I'm not sure.
I guess I'm just asking about the process.
Yeah, could I just leave that to the mayor and your advisors as to how that might happen?
It's appropriate. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Glenn, you've got a question. I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question to Colin, if I may, is the other CCTOs in and around the country, whether what they are currently doing with their SOIs, or are they doing anything? Is there any comment or have you had any feedback regarding other CCTOs in the
Yeah,
SOI?
yeah, thanks, Lynn. Some feedback, general though it may be, is that they are all now looking at whether it makes sense for their CCTOs to be putting in forecasts by the 30th of June, particularly for those sectors that have been significantly affected. And I think the feedback has been that there is some good logic in what QLDC is considering in terms of some additional time to really understand what the COVID-19 world looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Glenn. Megan, I'm sorry I missed you.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I was just on another interaction. Technology is an amazing thing with Alice Baum, and I wonder if I could just refer to Alice. The thought that you have there, Nikki, is the potentiality is that we would not be able to agree the SOI today. It would have to go back to the board and then come back again. But I just want to check if that is the case. And Alice, is there another way around this so that we can still agree it today?
Yeah, I think we could quite simply add that wording in now and just amend the resolution slightly to agree the document with the additional wording and just make that subject to board approval. And if for any reason the board didn't subsequently approve that wording, it would need to come back, but that avoids the need for it to come back if the board is simply happy to approve later.
Okay, that's good advice. Alice, do you think you could draft something quickly as we continue the debate and then bring it back?
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Alice. Quentin, you're next up.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a statement to make in the discussion, but I'll just cover the questions for the QAC at this stage. The first is you've already, and you know, I think that is a viable approach if we can make some changes to that wording to reflect the CapEx program that might get some people across, well, give some people some comfort. That might be helpful. The second, you talked about the Crown Infrastructure Partners application. Can you just confirm that you won't be taking the opportunity to seek expansion-related CapEx through stimulus package programs?
Yes, I can confirm that the capital project expression, very high level expression of interest we put into the government stimulus package is for just improvement of the existing terminal. I think I explained it was around compliance, security, some seismic strengthening that's all within the existing footprint, and sustainability initiatives. It is not to do with capacity of the airport and expansion of the airport.
Thank
No,
you.
I appreciate that. And just one other question is just around the process for the SOI. Obviously, we've established over both through the Act, but also as a matter of practice, that we have received the SOI early. We have the ability to respond to the QAC and come back with a final version prior to the deadline. Do you anticipate that we'll be able to replicate that cycle and even potentially a statement of expectation preceding an October deadline?
That would be my hope, that we would be having the same process. But what about you, Colin? You're probably and Sarah, you're much more up to date with all the steps. But we do see this as, you know, we're trying to do something similar.
Yeah,
and I'll let Colin respond, but you know, clearly one of the things we're hearing from the community is one about transparency and around process. And I suppose if we can give some comfort that that process will be complete and revisited prior to the October thing, rather than just sort of land on our desk at that time, I think that will give some comfort as well.
Colin, you had some comment there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the key thing is that the joint steering group, as Adrian was referring to earlier, meets through the process as we did through the process of leading up to the SOI that's before council today, is a critical element to that. And I think we need to continue that work because it's been very good to date.
Thank you, Colin.
And I appreciate that, and just encourage it. I know there were comments from Adrian before that that would probably happen in July or August potentially, and I would suggest we need to bring that forward to sort of May and June in order to have those discussions, if that's what happens.
Right, Mike, you've got a comment?
Say, I think certainly if the letter of expectations is going to change, then I agree with you, Quentin. I think that would be the first order of business, and the earlier that is done, the better, recognizing the fluid nature of the environment that we're in right now. So that might be slightly challenging as well for council. Thank
you, Colin. Mike, you've got a question?
Not a question, but perhaps a comment based on the exchange. Certainly, I agree with Colin and Adrian that continuing to work through the steering group, which I think the resolutions keep in play, is important. And the earlier we have that conversation, the better. So, looking from our perspective as council, certainly beginning those conversations in the latter part of June would be the latest we would be looking for, and obviously continuing that dialogue right through, which I think also underscores part of the timeframes that are required to make sure that both QAC and QLDC are on the same page in terms of the SOI.
Thank you, Mike. Nikki, we have got standing orders suspended, so I will take one more question from you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked the question the other day of Colin, just on that capital program in the table on page 55, there's a bit of spending on land acquisition, and I was just wanting to know whether that was intended for lot 6 or if that was something else, and if lot 6 sits outside of that, it'll just make a difference to, because obviously my concern is total spend, and credit limits and ability to pay down debt looking forward. And if we still have a massive amount to spend on lot 6, I'd still be quite concerned. So if it was that for lot 6, intended for lot 6, or for something else?
Primarily.
And look, could I just clarify, Councillor Grading, that we have already acquired lot 6. The only issue that there are statutory processes that we have been engaged with for about a decade. The only issue that legally needs to be settled is compensation. So we've there is a process that is extremely advanced. We can provide the council with a briefing note if you'd like, just about the legal process and stage that we're at.
Thank you. So there are no further questions for Adrian or Colin. So I will move that we go back into standing orders. Seconded. Thank you, Glenn. Again, we'll take it that unless somebody signifies on the chat bar they have an objection. Nope. Right, so we're now back into standing orders. Councillors, I now invite you to put forward your comments. Penny, you're first up. Hello, Penny.
You're still muted, Ben.
Sorry, IT challenges sometimes, guys. I'm really sorry about that. I think I want to make some comments to endorse comments that have already been made, but I feel it's quite critical to put them forward because it doesn't take me to highlight how critical our airport is for this region, not only as a region, but for our local economy and for our long-term future. The majority of us in this community, I think, understand the hurdles ahead of us, and hurdles that we have never seen in our lifetime, certainly not in mine, and I think that's going to be a huge challenge for us. Some of us in the community are very keen to understand and have clarity in processes. Some of us want to have a totally new plan. And COVID-19 has blown us out the water, really, because I want to take that into consideration. Yes, we've all heard that the community are worried about the noise boundary expansions and the growth in our airport area, or even in our total region. Well, my attitude is this: COVID-19 has blown this out of the water. It's solved all our problems in that regard. Mother Nature has gazumped us, I feel, and we need to move on. We need a well thought out document. We need a business plan for AC19 after COVID. We need to take on board the community's ideas. We need to read the readjusted Martin Jenkins report. We need to consider the environment. We need to consider the climate action plan. And we need to assess the global strategy for travel. We need to understand what airlines are proposing. All this will take time to create a worthwhile document, a plan that can lead us forward into the next 3 years. This cannot be achieved in the next 3 months. The airport has requested 5 months, and I concur. This will give them time to write something and give us 4 to say 6 weeks to be able to debate it with the council, with the community, and come up with a viable plan for our future. Our priorities at the moment, dare I say, are to ensure the airport is looking after the well-being of their staff and triaging the business, not writing another SOI or tweaking words in a document for July the 31st. We need to park the current SOI and support our airport to create a fit-for-purpose document that we can all be proud of in October. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Penny. Appreciate that. Neve, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to signal that I intend to move a motion to receive the draft 2020 Statement of Intent, SOI, and direct the Queenstown Airport Corporation to produce a condensed but still fit for purpose SOI that more accurately reflects the COVID-19 situation by the end of July. I emailed this motion to my fellow councillors yesterday afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking the QAC for its work in preparing the draft SOI and the steering group for its valuable input into the process. I would also like to thank the members of the public who took the time and effort to submit on this for public forum. There is no debating that COVID-19 has completely changed everyone's world. I would like to acknowledge that there is honourable intent behind the recommendation to approve this draft SOI. Unfortunately, I don't believe this intent is reflected in the recommendation. Firstly, this document is not a holding document. It is a self-declared invalid document. It achieves precisely nothing in the way of oversight or governance, and therefore presents what I feel to be an untenable risk to the council. It is my personal belief that approving or adopting it today would be a dereliction of duty, and more so because it is completely unnecessary to do so. Secondly, it is completely unnecessary. Council has no legal requirement or obligation to adopt the draft document today at this meeting. The SOI currently in place fulfills statutory obligations until the end of June 2020 or until the end of July if we extend the deadline as permitted by the Local Government Act. Thirdly, there appears to be an assumption that preparing a condensed SOI that is fit for purpose in this current volatile situation is quite tricky. It's not. For the foreseeable future, there is little revenue and a pile of expenses. An overview of how QUAC intends to service its debt and its recovery plan. It's not a wall-mounted moonbeam. It's a very basic requirement. I would like to point out that if we did actually discuss with the QAC the possibility of providing a more appropriate document by the end of July, the councillors up until Colin and Adrian's comments earlier had not been informed. Point 9 of the council report accompanying agenda item 1 states, affirm the council's confidence in the capability and capacity of the board and management of QAC to protect the asset and maintain a successful and future-focused airport CCTO on behalf of the district. So I suggest we demonstrate that confidence by asking the QAC to do its job. There is a fair likelihood that come October, the economic environment will be just as variable as it is now, and all we will have achieved by delaying this process is further undermining trust in this council and kicking the SOI down the road again. However, if we accept that QAC needs 6 months to draw up a comprehensive and fit for purpose SOI, couldn't we have come up with a process that allows for this, that doesn't necessitate agreeing an invalid document? So my major concern with the draft SOI is the level of risk. And just to explain my concerns, if we can just imagine that this is the draft SOI, it's actually a drawing by my 8-year-old, and this is the rest of the document. So if someone brings a legal action against either the council or the QAC, then, you know, what we're going to be saying is, we would like to refer you to this statutory document agreed at the 23rd of April council meeting of full council. We're actually not that sure what exactly it says, except for COVID-19. But otherwise, we have what looks like a vehicle here. It could be a lunar module, and this looks a bit like a space probe, and presumably it's not unreasonable to assume that these are planets, but if they are in fact ping pong balls, then this is closer than this one is. But honestly, your guess is as good as mine. That's where my primary concern with the draft SOI and agreeing it is that it doesn't give
Councillor
us
Shaw, I do need to get you to wrap it up. We're way over time.
So I would like to propose this motion to receive the 2020 draft SOI, resolve to extend the deadline for submission of a condensed but fit for purpose SOI to the 30th of July as per the Local Government Act, and direct the QAC to produce a condensed yet fit for purpose SOI by the 30th of July. This would fulfill our overarching objective of giving QAC 6 months to produce an SOI that responds to the current situation without legally approving a meaningless document that achieves nothing in the way of governance and oversight. Thank
you, Councillor Shaw. If you're putting that as a motion, you're nodding. Yep. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that, Jim.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion on that motion before I put it to the vote?
I'd
Nikki?
like to speak to that if I can. So for me, what Neve's proposing is the best way forward, particularly given we've got some changes that we'd like to make anyway. It addresses a number of issues, including, you know, the levels of trust within the community and building that. And, you know, there's a lot of concerns that it would deal with. Obviously, from the submissions, I'd anticipate a lot of comments from the councillors that we are not going to grow the airport, that this SOI doesn't allow for growth. I think what I took from it was that the public is still, despite the threat to tourism, is really concerned about airport expansion. And I think the key thing is if we lose our majority shareholding at this point, and it won't take much to lead to another sort of 25% share sale given the situation we're in, we will lose that ability to control airport expansion in the future. And I think now more than ever, we have to manage the risks to our investment. And it's not just a moral thing, this is a legal obligation that we have under the Local Government Act, under section 105 of our investment policy, which is set out in our LTP. The financial forecasts have been invalidated. The capital program hasn't. I understand Alice is writing up some wording around that, but there's still a lack of clarity around how much we're going to need to spend, or QAC, apologies, is going to need to spend to purchase lot 6. So we just have no visibility around what's going to be spent and how that's going to be serviced, how that debt's going to be serviced, the expiry of those credit limits. There's a whole lot that I think we need to know if we're going to be managing this investment appropriately in these really uncertain times. So that's where I'm coming from. I think what needs proposed is the best way forward.
Thank you. I'll just remind you, Councillor Gladding, we are not managing it. We are charging with the airport board with managing it. So questions for councillors or comments from councillors on Councillor Shaw's motion. I see Quentin, you had some comment, and Val and Glyn. Do these actually relate to the motion put forward by Councillor Neve, or is this about what the general discussion is on?
I'm happy to just touch on my comments on it briefly. I do find it hard to consider, especially in light of not understanding what Alice's recommendations might be on the CapEx components in there, but I don't, you know, there's been a lot of discussion around risk, and I don't quite understand where the perceived risk is in this situation. Yes, yeah,
okay.
Unclear at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Glyn, you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there, Glyn. Somebody's got their mic open and is typing. Can they please close their mic? Thank you.
Yes, just firstly, I appreciate the views of the Chief Executive of the QAC, with the main focus for the airport's on the actual team and the businesses that are associated with the airport, as well as the employees of those businesses. And I think that should be our focus as well. Now, obviously, this motion, I don't think has any empathy towards those workers and the securing of those jobs. I think it's a waste, complete waste of resource by the airport and by the council to endeavour in going on trying to work on a document, a new document, to fit a scenario, to fit a what if in July. And I do also want to note that obviously the motion hasn't thought of the implications on councillor involvement by making the July 30 extension a little bit remiss why the further extension to councillor comments to the board has not been made, which is also under the Act. So I just think it's also just on the fly, on the run consideration. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Right. Is there any other comment by anybody who hasn't commented on Neve's motion wishes to make on it?
Jim, Val here. I'm looking back at what the option 1 was that we were given. And to me, I'm just wondering if Nikki and Neve don't, or maybe you could clarify the difference between receiving the SOI and accepting it. Because to me, all we're being asked is to receive the document as it's been given to us. We're not actually making a decision as to whether we accept it or not. And I just think that perhaps there is a lack of understanding as to the difference between those two things. Or maybe I'm not understanding the difference between those two situations. Because, okay. and the other thing is in commenting, look, we're not even out of level 3 yet. We're not even in level 3 yet. We can watch the example of what's happened in Singapore, where the numbers have jumped back up again. I think to come out with a meaningful document by the end of June, July is pie in the sky. I think for them to be able to come up with something meaningful even by October is a big ask. So I don't feel that time frame is appropriate, and I would not support Neve's motion either, given the time frame that she is putting on it. And that was my only comment there. I'm just wondering if people fully understand the difference between accepting and receiving, and maybe you could clarify that, Jim.
Okay, so reminder, councillors, we're talking about comments on Neve's motion. Mike, can you clarify Val's, the first part of her comment there? Hello, Mike.
Your mic is on.
Sorry about that. So I think the key issue there is the difference between agree and receive, and the law is very explicit. The process of effectively approving the SOI, the law requires the council to agree. Receiving the SOI simply acknowledges that we have it, and the process of actually so the SOI is the board's document. It's not the council's document. The board is responsible for offering the SOI to us, and as we all know, it goes through that dialogue between a draft, and we make comment, and the board go away and they effectively resolve and propose an SOI to us. We can receive it, and we had a lot of debate about that last year, but receiving it simply brings it into the council system. The key purpose and Resolution 6 of the council's report is to agree it, and that is the formal step that council needs to give life to the SOI as it stands. And I suppose noting both within the SOI and in the subsequent resolutions that that a modified version of that SOI will be commenced and reported back to council by the end of October.
Thank you, Mike. And Megan, I see that you've clarified a typo where you're saying it should read agree, not receive. I think that answers Val's question. Councillors, do we have any other comments on Councillor Shaw's motion? Otherwise, we need to vote on it. Nikki, you have already commented on it, and understanding orders, you have one opportunity to comment. However, I will permit one further comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate that. Look, it was just going back to Quentin's comment and also yours around financial management. There is, as I was looking through this, and doing my research on it, the Office of the Auditor General has stated that local authorities with CCOs need to have an effective governance regime for managing the risks associated with CCOs, including through the statement of intent process. This is part of council's responsibility for prudent financial management. So it is our job to manage our investments, and our CCTO is one of our investments. And for me, the risk is that we have, I believe QUAC has around $70 million of borrowings at the moment. If we fulfilled the capital program, it would be double that. It would hit 140 million. That's actually the credit limit. Those lines of credit expire, this based on the last financial forecast, halfway through next year, and the further 90 million expires halfway through 2023. So I just can't understand, without further information about the extensions to those credit limits, how much we're planning to spend, what the expected revenue is, how we can allow this SOI to go through, because it's just not prudent financial management. I think we need time to look at the statement that Alice is drafting up. We need time to understand what needs to be spent on lot 6, so that we can be sure that our majority shareholding is safe. Thank you for that opportunity. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Right. Look, there's no point in debating the meaning of management, because I think we're coming at it from different ends. But however, let's have a vote on Neve's motion, please.
Sorry, when do I exercise my right to reply, please?
You can exercise it now if you have something further to say. But
I do.
Right.
Sorry, I just wanted to make it absolutely fundamentally clear. I'm not suggesting that the QAC be expected to come back with a full comprehensive SOI by the end of June or July. I'm just asking that they present their recovery plan, all of the objectives of the SOI. There's a lot about the SOI that is valid regardless of this situation, but you know, addressing the financial status and its plans for recovery should only be 3 to 5 pages. Well, I mean, that's just an estimate. I'm not talking about a complete rewrite of the SOI. I do acknowledge that the SOI document has attained a huge and disproportionate status within the community. It's become the lightning rod for the general dissatisfaction around how the council manages its seat CTO. Bearing this in mind, regardless of when this became public knowledge, this agenda item to fast track the LGA process was always going to be perceived badly within the community. I believe that approving the draft SOI would be a dereliction of duty on our part. One of the reasons put forward for approving this draft SOI is that we've all got bigger things to worry about. This district, it does face a social welfare crisis. Many of us are facing an extremely tenuous financial future. We do have bigger things to worry about. So I have no idea why we have chosen to unnecessarily propose that we approve a meaningless document and cause additional stress to our residents. And by we, I want to be clear here, I'm referring to us, the elected members. The 78 submissions in public forum opposing this recommendation is on us, not on QAC, not the media, not community organisations. It's us. COVID-19 is being put forward as the reason we can't, in this instance, direct our CCTO. Yet every single time since the election and before, that we have been presented with an opportunity to demonstrate leadership and governance over our CCTO, we've dropped the ball. That's not a symptom of COVID-19. So I would like to ask that we take this opportunity to start actually governing our CCTO, starting now, because until we do, we're doing disservice to our council staff, the QAC board and staff, and our community. So I don't know if you want me to restate the motion or...
No, I don't think you need to. I think we've got it, and it's noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Jane, can you take a vote, please, on Neve's motion?
Right, I'll address this in random order. So my first is Councillor Lewis.
No.
Councillor Clark.
No.
Councillor MacDonald.
No.
Councillor Smith.
No, sorry.
Mayor Bolt.
No.
Councillor Copeland.
Negative.
Councillor Miller.
I'm sorry to be a nuisance here, but
I'm sorry, Val, you can't comment here. You either have to vote or not, or yes or no.
I'm going to abstain because I can't remember what the motion was.
All right, I'll
I
take your
can
abstention.
restate the motion if required.
No, that's not necessary. We'll take Val's abstention.
Councillor Ferguson,
Opposed.
Councillor McLeod,
No.
and I would suggest that Councillor Shaw and Gladding are voting for the motion. So the motion is lost.
Thank you, and thank you for your debate on that. So we come back to the primary discussion, the proposals before us, and I now invite comments on what is before us, although Alice, I think you signalled you may wish to speak. Do you have a comment before we get into this?
Oh, no, that's fine. I was just going to clarify a point that Councillor Gladding made, but it's now irrelevant. So
all right, thank you. Righto. So, councillors, do we have any further comment on this matter? Right. So, look, I think actually I'm remiss. We need to actually put the motion. That is the items 1 to 9 in your papers. I'm not going to read the whole lot out. You've got it in front of you. I will move it. Do we have a seconder? We've got a seconder there.
Sorry, Joe, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Glenn. So we now open it for discussion. Can we have discussion? Callum, are you next on this? Sorry, I'm losing my little chat line here. Ferg, you're first up. You've got your mic on mute, Ferg.
You think I would have got that one right?
Yeah, and your job, I would hope so.
Thank you, through the chair, Your Worship. Can I just start by saying that my thoughts, and echo your thoughts as well, Your Worship, with every resident of the QLDC, and to thank them for the effort that they're putting in to get through the lockdown and to make sure that they all continue to take care out there. Who has any idea how the region's residents and businesses are going to come out of all of this? Nobody has. As we witness what I believe is the future crashing into the present. I've been a part of this process for a number of years now, and weighing everything up, I've once again stepped carefully through the item as we must do. I've read all the submissions, and I thank the residents for doing that, and feel that some of the concerns are being addressed in the reports. I do take note of that word receive on page 29, number 14, re option 1. I don't subscribe to some of the points raised around pushing this through under the cover of COVID-19, or stealth tactics, or lack of transparency, etc. From my perspective, that doesn't exist, and I wouldn't expect it to, considering the community interest in this topic. I want to see a complete, accurate document now that we can take to the community and get done. I have trust and faith in our councillors' steering group, who are critical. And I don't want to be judged by people's opinion in the press. I want to be judged by what the end statement of intent for the next 3 years contains. Thank you.
Thank you, Ferg. Good words. Alice, just breaking in there to the discussion. Alice, you've put some words on the chat bar there. Perhaps you just want to read those to us, and then
Yes,
we'll get back to discussion.
Yes, can do. And I didn't tell you where I proposed to add them, so I'll clarify that too. On the introduction section of the SOI, where there is the disclaimer text in bold, I was proposing to just add this after that last bold paragraph as a new bold paragraph. And my wording is QAC has committed that it will not undertake any spending on capital projects identified in this SOI document until a new SOI has been agreed by Council, which takes into account the impacts of COVID-19 and the QAC's revised business strategy. The only exclusion to this will be emergency capital expenditure if the need arises before an SOI is prepared.
Thank you. Right. Got that wording. So Callum, you're next up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo Ferg's comments, and I thought that your statement at the start of the meeting was well said. With regard to the SOI and the way this has been handled, it potentially, if you looked at pause and reflect, you'd say that there may have been an opportunity missed. But the one thing about opportunities missed is that they can become opportunities that can be realised. I've voted not to accept the QAC's SOI on 2 separate occasions. Due to the exceptional circumstances COVID-19 has given to us, I will be voting to accept the SOI this time. I would, however, ask that the next SOI, QAC undertakes to turn its mind to the fact that this is the single best opportunity we'll ever get to reimagine our economic pillars. This is also the time to rise to the climate change challenge, specifically how QAC will identify and take opportunities to influence the aviation industry and airlines to reduce their carbon footprint associated with air travel. I use those words because they're used by QAC in their the current SOI, and I'd like them to expand on that. I applaud the QAC's desire to address the immediate needs of the airport community. They must meet those needs, the immediate needs, and they must be given the time to do that. This, however, cannot compromise the longer term, higher level goals and aspirations for this community. I also applaud QAC's commitment to sustainability. However, I will personally be looking for the next SOI for a shift from sustainability to regenerative. I would look to the report, and on page 29, point 16, for me sums it up. Public interest in this process will be better and more meaningfully served through a modified SOI that reflects the true impact of COVID-19 and can incorporate the findings from both the Council's spatial plan and the economic and social impact assessments currently be completed. One of the things I am most proud of with QLDC is our commitment to bold leadership. QAC must provide the bold leadership this district, your shareholders, have been crying out for. And I will be looking to the next SOI to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Callum. John, you're next up.
As a point of order, do we need to move to amend the document to include Alice's new wording?
I was going to wait until we'd heard councillors' comments and then consider that new wording. However, you could move to have that wording included now, if you like.
Well, I think it's fundamental to where I stand with this, and I would like to move that we do put that new wording into the beginning of the SOI and then approve the document, hopefully with that wording in, and then it can go back to the board. It's a terribly difficult position we all find ourselves in, and it's a tough time for everybody. We need to give these people the time to give us a meaningful document. We don't know what next month will bring. We don't know what the month after will bring. And I think to get something meaningful, we have to give them this amount of time. And if we can proceed with this wording added to it, I'm happy to support the motion.
I'm happy to second John's motion.
Thank you.
Sorry, no, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I'll just jump in. Before we go ahead with this, just before, I'm just a bit concerned we might be tying ourselves in knots. Are we allowed to actually change the SOI because it's a QAC document? Don't they have to change the document and then we approve it? I think if Alice or Mike can speak to that, I'm just a little bit wary on that point there.
Yes, so no, Alice, you go ahead, because we do need to inject the amendment, but Alice can answer that question then.
Yeah, so I think rather than moving a motion now to include the wording into the SOI, we should amend the current resolution 6 to agree the SOI subject to this wording being included and agreed by the board.
All right, so just get that clear. You would be adding that wording into number 6 under the recommendations.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So do we, Alice, clarify for me here, do we need a motion to amend item 6 to what you've just said?
Jane, yes, yeah, we do.
Right, great. Okay, so John, you have moved that that wording be added. So can I take it your meaning that it be added to item 6?
Yes, happy with that.
And Callum, you seconded.
Happy with that.
Righto. Nikki, you've said you've got a small amendment to the wording.
Yeah, which makes it difficult now, but I'd like to move a small amendment. So where it says will not undertake any spending, could we amend that to will not commit to or undertake any spending on capital projects, including those identified in this SOI? That would.
I'd be pretty comfortable that the original motion has that intent in it. I think we could mess around with the words all day. Let's put the motion as it is. Jane, you need to do the job here, please.
So Jim, could I, because I've actually requested that we make an amendment to the motion, so there may not be a seconder, but can I please have that right to?
Yep.
Thank you. So I'd just like to move a small amendment to add the words commit to or before undertake. I don't know if there's anyone who's prepared to second that, but
I'll second.
Thank you, Neve. So voting on the motion to change the motion. Jane?
Right. Now, whilst the intention is to provide randomised voting for each item, obviously this is the second one for this item, so the order of voting will be the same. So just signalling that. So in terms of the amendment, I will first ask Councillor Lewis.
No.
Councillor Clark.
You're muted, Penny.
No, sorry, guys.
Councillor MacDonald.
No.
Councillor Smith.
I'm going to abstain. I think we should be dealing with the one in front of us.
Mayor Bolt.
No.
Councillor Copeland.
Negative.
Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Ferguson.
Opposed.
Councillor McLeod.
I seconded it, so I'll say no.
Right. And so I assume that Councillors Blading and Shaw are voting against, but that means that the amendment is lost.
Thank you. Right, so we come back to John's original motion, which was to include the wording Alice has put forward into recommendation 6. We have a mover and a seconder. And is there any further discussion on that particular item without going back to the overall discussion? Quentin, you had a comment? This is on John's amendment.
Yeah, on the amendment to add the Alice's comments, yeah, and I do think that goes some way to addressing some people's concerns. I don't know if we need to get into the fine tuning of that wording. I think the general intent is clear.
Perfect, right. Okay, so let's have voting on John's amendment. Jane, off you go. Just to remind everybody, we're voting to include Alice's wording into recommendation 6.
Yes, so it's just an amendment to part 6 of the current motion sitting on the table.
Would it be helpful if I posted the amended wording in the comments?
Yes, it would.
Yes, I
Alice,
think you should, Alice.
There we go.
Right, okay, you've all got it in front of you. So Jane, off you go.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes.
Councillor Clark?
Yes.
Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Bolt?
Yes.
Councillor Shaw?
Yes.
Councillor Copeland?
Affirmative.
Councillor Gladding?
In favour.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
In favour.
Okay, and as mover and seconder, I have assumed Councillors McDonald and McLeod are in favour of the motion, so the motion is carried unanimously.
Right, thank you, councillors. So let's get back to the overall item. And Quentin, you're first up.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I'll try and keep it brief. I'm conscious that we do need to bring this to a head. Firstly, you know, we can only acknowledge the hardship and disruption this is causing for everyone, including the QAC community and staff. Now, it clearly, we've heard a lot of submissions, we've heard a lot of discussion, both from the QAC and from council, that we do need to recast the projection of numbers and financials. We need to adjust our operation objectives and operating model for the QAC. Now, these points are common, I think, across virtually all the submissions. The position of the QLDC and the QAC. I don't see any conflict between these points. We all agree we need to revisit the SOI. Many of the statements make the submissions make the statement that the entire document is irrelevant, and I've reviewed the document page by page in light of this. And while clearly the financial projection, CapEx program, and a limited number of the objectives are irrelevant or impacted by COVID-19, a vast majority of the document remains relevant, and actually broadly speaking is you know, universally supportable in terms of how we deal with customers, how we deal with you know, improved sustainability, consultation, social license, climate change components are all positive progressions within this version of the SOI. I reflect back on what we've heard from the community over the last couple of years, and the three things that I could summarise as being the primary risk and primary concern factors for the community are the expansion of noise boundaries that could in Queenstown. And I want to be clear that this cannot occur under the current scope of the SOI within years 1 or year 2, and certainly not before October when a new SOI is, and possibly never. Depending on the outcomes of the Martin Jenkins report and our own and the master planning processes, then, you know, only then could any of those things be considered. Secondly, that commercial flights would be returned or pushed back into Wanaka. This certainly can't occur under the scope of the SOI before us today, nor is there CapEx even within the 3-year program to that we should, you know, that the community should be concerned about that in terms of expansion. And once again, it is subject to the master planning process, which requires full endorsement by council. Once again, possibly never, depending on the outcomes of those processes. Sale of shares, loss of control of QAC is fundamentally controlled within our constitution and is completely within the power of QLDC as the primary shareholder. So I want to, clearly I've been on the steering group and there was a number of things that, you know, we've sought to have included. A significant one for me was this is the first time that any of the SOIs, or at least in recent years, it's my knowledge, have included the provisions that any future expansion of airport is now fully subject to consulted master planning processes that requires the endorsement of council. This is a substantial increase of protection for our communities that are concerned about undue expansion within our airports, and that alone in some ways provides incentive for me to want to cast that requirement in ink in this process rather than let it slip. I do see that as a significantly important advancement in this SOI. As to whether we recast an SOI in July or October, I honestly can't, in the current environment and certainly in the current trading environment and international tourism environment, I don't see any particular downside in providing that delay, provided we go through a normal SOI process where we make that document public and we give for all the councillors opportunity for feedback and feed that back to the board. I also acknowledge that the master planning that those things would depend on, that referred to before, is also now not proposed to be undertaken in the 2021 year. So although it certainly kicks that decision down the road a bit, we do still have a need to plan and create a vision for our airports that our community can support. I actually agree with a lot of the submissions that the COVID-19 events really do require us to recast and understand what a post-COVID world would look like, and that and what our whole economic and model will depend upon. I touched on before that I encouraged the QAC to utilise the steering group, and I think we can start to work towards a solution earlier than was sort of projected. As I said, I think those discussions can happen quite early in the piece and continually. I'm overwhelmed by the reaction of most of the people that I know and most of the people that I've spoken to, is that most people don't want to go back to normal. They don't want to go back to the old normal. They want a new normal, and that the old normal wasn't serving us particularly well, nor was it would it potentially serve us into the future. So we need to collectively look to a different future between us. I remain committed to good strategic governance of the QAC and good strategic planning for our futures. And not one that's driven by in the great words of Dr. Zeus, I am figuring on getting biggering. We need to move beyond that, and as we know how that played out for the Onceler and the Lorax. So at this stage, subject to the, I can see a path forward to. I can see some value in in approving this document over the one that we currently sit under, which is the December one. This provides us with more protection than the December version. And I can see a path forward to us creating a new vision in conjunction with QAC for the October version. So at this stage, I'm likely to support.
Thank you, Quentin. Those well thought through words. We need to bring this to a head. Does any councillor have anything new they want to add to this, please, before we put it to the vote? Right. Okay, Jane, let's have a vote. This is on the primary motion. We're voting on the recommendations 1 through 9, and noting that, of course, item 6 on the motion of Councillor McDonald has been altered.
And I should just remind you, because it was just a wee while ago, so this motion was originally put by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Lewis. So I will start with Councillor Clark.
Support.
Councillor McDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
No.
Councillor Copeland.
Affirmative.
Councillor Gladding.
Opposed.
Councillor Miller.
Accept.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor McLeod.
Support.
And I also assume that both the Mayor as the mover and Councillor Lewis as the seconder supports the motion, so it is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors, for that somewhat marathon debate on that matter. We now move to item 2, which is the recommended permanent speed limit changes, which is page 28 of your council papers. And Polly, you're presenting this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'll take the report as being read, but I would like to point out there was an anomaly on one of the maps in the report on page 71. It shows Clanmac Road in Wanaka as being 80 kilometres an hour when it should have been shown as 40. But I understand Jane did send this correction out to everyone. I'd also like to highlight the locations in this report came from consultation and submissions in the 2019 Speed Bylaw Review. To meet the NZTA speed management rule requirements, we needed to complete the process and action targeted consultation in those areas. And finally, as you can see from the submissions, consultation came back fairly positive from the community and the key organisations and agencies consulted with.
Thank you, Polly. Councillors, discussion. John.
Yeah, I just note in the tables that are in the item that it says the Wanaka Urban Traffic Boundary Area will move from 40 to 40. Is there a typo?
Yes, that is. Sorry, that should be 50 to 40.
Well spotted, John.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Sorry, could I just clarify,
Sure,
Councillor? Sorry, afternoon, councillors. The council resolved last August to move the Wanaka urban traffic area to 40 kilometres. So that resolution has already occurred. So the 40 to 40 is actually accurate in the recommendation.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you,
Well done.
You're welcome.
Quentin, you've got a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's just a couple of quick comments. Firstly, that that we haven't made this up, that this has been brought down to us from above, in that we are enacting the NZTA guidelines and around speed limits. I certainly accept that there are some. If we were to make individual decisions, some of us would do different things with some components of this, but largely it is driven by guidelines that are outside of our control. secondly, and this is sort of directed at Polly and Jendi, is that, you know, and I had a discussion with Polly offline, is that there are a couple of things that would, even with that in mind, it would appear anomalous, and that would be Gordon Road, Frederick Street, Enterprise Drive, off Ballantyne Road, that they are 50-kilometre environments, and clearly they're quite constrained speed environments with a lot of congestion around the industrial area, and just whether that you would see that that might be more appropriate to be 40 rather than 50.
Thank you. Comments on that, Polly?
Because they will now, if this is adopted to go through, those areas will fall into the urban boundary limit, so we can bring them to 40 at any point. The speed management guide did come back with the operating speeds of 50 for those areas. Also, but I think there is a change in the usage in those areas with 3 parks opening up in the schools. Traditionally, it was a very industrial vehicle access area. It's now coming into a lot more with pedestrian, cyclists, and the school and the supermarket around that area. So it could go to 40, and it does add consistency to the whole Wanaka area. And we can do that under the rule.
Okay.
Jendi, do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, Polly, it's the land use area around that industrial zone in Wanaka has changed, and I think the council will be able to foresee it changing with the 2 new schools, the primary school and high school. So that would affect, I guess what I'm trying to say is in time you're going to need to change that to 40 kilometres. So whether you do it now or in the future is a decision for council to make.
Okay, well, if it's appropriate, I'd be happy to add that to the list of those. Well, there's 4 streets, in fact, and Polly can advise which they are. There's Gordon, Fredericks, Enterprise, and the 4th one, sorry.
Oh, haven't got that in front of me, sorry, 1 minute.
Was it Umbers?
No, that's within the new subdivision. Anyway, if we can add those to the resolution, I'd be happy with that.
Well, let's hear the rest of the discussion on it, and then you might need to put a motion to amend the recommendation. Callum, you've got a comment?
Yes, just a couple of points to note. One is thank you to Polly and Jendi. I've been involved in this, and both of those fine, upstanding women have been involved in this marathon doing a pile of work, and there's nothing more guaranteed to set the world aflame than discussion on speed limits or limits on the public. It has come down from above. It certainly will be a positive. And also there's something that people need to realise. I acknowledge Lyle Cox's submission, but something people need to realise is that the limit is a limit. It's not necessarily the speed that you travel at. If you actually aggregate the speed you travel at, you'd probably be closer to 30, 35 than to the 50. So the moving to 40 is not going to add hours to your day. It's just a absolute step in the right direction for the urban environment. And if we want to discuss amendments, I'd be happy to move.
Right, thank you. Mike, you've got a comment you want to make?
Thanks, Jim. Just a question, and not to dispute the intent of what Councillor Smith's asking, but just a question to Polly and to Jendi. Have we scope in this meeting to make that adjustment now, or under the new rule, should that be reported back separately? I know the new rule gives us a lot more flexibility to do that. I'm just wondering whether that's something we should do today or come back separately on.
We did take advice on this from our technical engineering, and yes, we can do it today if the urban boundaries for Wanaka move at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
And just for confirmation, the locations of those streets, it's Frederick, Gordon Road and Connell Terrace. I couldn't find a 4th one there, Quentin.
Enterprise Drive you've got, Quentin. Hello, Quentin.
Yes, that's correct. It was Gordon, Enterprise, Connell and Frederick Street.
All right. So do you wish to put forward a motion to amend the recommendation to include those?
Yes, please. Yep.
Right. And Callum, I take it that you are seconding that? Correct. Thank you. Jane, can you take a vote on that, please?
Yes, certainly can. So this is to amend, well, to make additions to the present recommendation to include those 4 streets. So I will start with Councillor Clark.
Support.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Gladding.
In favour.
Mayor Bolt.
In favour.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Copeland.
Affirmative.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Okay, and I've marked Councillors Smith and McLeod in favour, so that motion is carried unanimously.
Great. So then there being no further comments posted, we'll put the, sorry, we need somebody to actually move and a second, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had
I'll
that
move
yet.
the
Jane,
motion,
have we?
Jim.
You'll move it. Thanks, Heath. Seconded by?
Yep.
Who was
Ferg.
who was yipping? Ferg. Thank you. So sorry, Jane, go through the process again.
Okay, Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Copeland, yes, if he's moved it. Councillor McLeod.
Yes, indeed.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Clark.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Mayor Bolt.
Yes.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Gladding.
Yes.
And I've assumed that Councillor Ferguson, as the seconder, also supports. So that
Yes.
motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, councillors. It takes us to item 3, which is the 2019-20 Capital Works Program reforecast. Pete, are you there? Hello, Pete. Does anybody know whether we have Pete Hansby?
You can hear me. Can you hear me okay, Jim?
Ah, no, I can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm operating off of 2 devices. So you get me in the camera in one and the voice in another. So
Well,
apologies.
we can probably understand your voice better than your picture.
Yeah. Nothing to add to the report. Jeremy, are you present? I think. Yep. Anything to add? Or otherwise, we'll take questions.
No, just open for any questions.
Thank you, gents. Questions?
Hi, Jim. Stu here. Just through you, Mr. Chair. Just we do need to amend the recommendation slightly. It refers to attachment A. There are actually 2 attachments, so it needs to read attachment A and attachment B.
Whereabouts are you, Stu?
That's on the recommendation, first page of the report.
Oh, right. Attachment A and B. Yep. Righto.
Yep.
Okay. We'll just take that. Thank you.
Jeremy is our senior management accountant. He can answer any questions of detail. He's been working through this reforecast, so it is a normal process, an established process for us to manage budget adjustments. But he can certainly fill in any clarification of any of those project cost changes.
Thank you. Comments, councillors? There being none, can we have a mover and a seconder, please?
Happy to
I'm
move.
I'll happy to second.
So that was John and Val, I think, was it?
Yep.
Thank you. Right, we have a mover and a seconder. Jane, usual process, please.
Yep, certainly. Okay, Councillor Ferguson,
In favour.
Councillor Clark,
In favour.
Councillor Gladding,
In favour.
Councillor Lewis,
In favour.
Councillor Smith,
Yes.
Councillor Copeland,
Affirmative.
Councillor McLeod,
Crack on.
Mayor Bolt,
Affirmative.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Okay, and as the mover and seconder, I've assumed that Councillors McDonald and Miller are in support of the motion, so it is carried unanimously.
Thank you, councillors. Item 4, underground services easement sought by Naitahu Property on behalf of the Queenstown Lakes District Council over Warren Park. Jenny, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, thank you. How are you, Jenny?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Anything to add to your paper?
Nothing to add, just happy to take questions.
All right. Questions, councillors? Looks pretty straightforward.
Happy to move.
Moved. Seconded.
Yeah. John.
Thank you, John. Jane, usual process.
Right, Mayor Bolt,
Affirmative.
Councillor Copeland,
Affirmative.
Councillor Shaw,
So,
Yes.
Nikki, can you mute your microphone? Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry, Jim, that went really quickly. I do actually have comments on this one and I didn't have time to. So you've already moved it, so I don't know what the process is now.
I think we're in the voting process on it now, Nikki. Was it something significant?
Well, yeah, personally, I think so. I mean, there's a big discussion to be had. I think they're talking about taking out a significant number of trees from Warren Park, and we've had no public consultation. So I think it would be worthy of some discussion. I'm sorry I didn't manage to get rid of chat and unmute in time, but can we do that or?
Well, look, let's do it because we are learning our way in this process. So off you go.
Thank you. So yeah, my concerns are that we've got a line of trees that at the moment provide significant shade and shelter and amenity along the edge of Warren Park. And they also provide screening to the development on that site, whether that's what's there now or what's intended to be there in the future. When we pull out those trees, we're going to lose them forever from along that boundary. They're mature, healthy trees, and there's a large number of them. They're never going to be able to be replaced on that site. So there's pipe work going along that boundary, and obviously we can't then plant trees nearby. So we're going to lose that significant shade that comes from planting those trees along that boundary. There is some proposal to fund some replacement trees, but the time it takes for those to grow, I would think that we're open to legal challenge on this because it comes down to your definition of permanently damaging or materially altering the reserve. If either of those things are going to happen, if we're going to materially alter or permanently damage, then public consultation is required. And I went back through eDocs and had a look at the notification decision on the subdivision consent. That notification decision actually stated that no trees would be removed from Warren Park. So I actually think by agreeing this and removing those trees, you're potentially putting that decision at risk as well. So I feel like we've backed into corner. As council, because subdivision consent was granted, there was no public comment then, the issue of the trees wasn't raised. So there are issues to think about going forward around how we manage trees, how infrastructure looks at that into the future. I don't know, and I was going to ask Jeannie this question, what we're actually getting, what is the cost, what is the value of the trees that are being taken down, because presumably the mitigation package is to provide money for trees. We don't know where they're going to go yet. And we don't know. I'm struggling with it, and I don't think I can approve it because I think there are legal issues here. And I don't know yet what those trees mean to the community. So I'm not in favour of this.
Thank you. Got that. So I do think somewhere in here, and I just can't lay hands on it, there's comment about replacing the trees. Callum, I think you're saying there's silver birch trees and they're being replaced. Jenny, have you got any further comment on this?
Yeah, look, we in Parks do acknowledge that those are large mature trees. Some of them are unhealthy. A few of them were pretty spindly, but yeah, there were a number of large trees in there. If we weren't able to negotiate the mitigation with Ngāi Tahu, which we've done based on the value of replacement trees, I wouldn't have been able to recommend that there wasn't material damage done to the reserve or permanent. But I'm confident with the mitigation package that is ring fenced to Warren Park, and the trees will be replaced on Warren Park, in addition to the wider reserve improvements that are subject to a further developers agreement, that the mitigation is appropriate there.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Right, we've had, hang on, I've got one more comment. Right, so we've got the motion, we've had a seconder, we've had Nikki's comments. Note that no one else is signalling an interest in discussing. Sorry, Jane, I'll ask you to recommence the voting process again.
Okay, thank you. I had received votes from the Mayor, Councillor Copeland and Councillor Shaw. Councillor McLeod.
Support.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Gladding.
Opposed.
Councillor Miller.
Affirmative. And I'm going to excuse myself from the meeting now. I have got to go somewhere.
Thank you, Val.
Cheers.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, affirmative. But can I also comment that the trees that are going to be planted, can we please make sure they're going to tune in to our climate action plan?
Thank you.
So that we've got the right type of trees that don't suck up too much water.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
And Councillor MacDonald.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, councillors. That brings us to item 5, the Chief Executive's report, which is page 108. Mike, over to you.
No, I think, Your Worship, the next item is the recovery plan report, which is item 5.
That is correct.
I'm there as item 6.
Righto, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. You're right.
So I think Megan and I can see Megan and Michelle there, so I presume they're going to take you through that.
Yep. Correct. So happy to get underway.
Thank you, Megan.
All right, I'm just going to very briefly introduce this. You'll see that we've got a couple of our key council staff who now hold 2 very different roles at the moment. Michelle Mawson, Deputy Recovery Manager, and Steve Baxton, and Recovery Manager. This undertaking has been enormous, and it got underway 5 weeks ago at the very commencement of this event, and that's absolutely critical. The welfare crisis that you outlined at the beginning of this meeting, Your Worship, needs to go hand in hand with recovery, because it's recovery that will see that welfare crisis start to dissipate. So we wanted to bring a report today that is public facing. It is for noting, but we think it's really important that our community understand how much work is actually happening in this recovery space. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Steve.
Thank you, Megan. Steve.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Megan, for that. I don't want to say much more. I'll throw it to a question shortly, but just to reinforce that recovery has a specific civil defence meaning, and we've done our best to draw on statutory guidance and civil defence experience to properly establish this right from day one, as Megan said. But in the framework of civil defence emergency, which is more geared towards traditional natural hazards, COVID-19's just without precedent in terms of speed, scale and scope. So the paper you have, the excellent paper that Michelle actually prepared, is reflective of some emergent thinking across council in terms of what a recovery function is in largely uncharted territory, and also there's an emerging national understanding around what this looks like. We are still, I understand, the only district in Otago and Southland that has established a recovery function. So in that context, you should all be assured that the planning for recovery is established and firing on all cylinders, and Michelle and I are happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you. Councillors, questions? Glenn.
Before we go to the vote, I think it'd be remiss of us not to say well done on this, on your efforts during the EOC. Personally, I've been very pleased to see the reports come through to us during this time, and I just wanted to pass on my thanks to you and all your team during this time. So that's all I wanted to say. Well done.
All right, thanks. And I would reiterate those comments, Glenn. Totally. Nikki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, me too. Thanks, you guys are great. We've got such an awesome team working on this. So I just went through it and just had a few comments, and I don't know if now's the right time because some of you might have some comment on it. Firstly, I absolutely support rebuilding that won't rebuild the problems that we've had in the past, and I took that from that document. Love the idea that we're going to get grassroots involvement and the whole community involved, and I was just thought I'd put it out there. You know, have you considered at some point when it's appropriate the use of something like a citizens assembly to make sure we capture the views of the community? Sorry, I'm talking, but you might at the end of it maybe you can comment. I think where we invest is going to be key. So to, I guess, Pete and Mike, if we can have some sort of workshop to revisit the decisions of the past and maybe or understand better where we're going with the long-term plan early on, and we discussed that in infrastructure the other day, that would be very much appreciated, because I think investment's going to be a key part of recovery and investing right. I was wondering why the plan doesn't mention the climate reference group, and maybe you can talk to that in a moment. I think that needs to be set up now and needs to have input across all programs. And also wondering if somewhere in there, could the recovery team, as part of its work, look at reviewing policies? I don't know whether the procurement policy, and maybe looking at whether we need new policies like a local resilience policy to help make sure our decisions are going in the right direction. And the final point I wanted to make was that it looks like it clearly our recovery position doesn't include the steering group or the economic and recovery task forces. So has a decision been made to pull those out of council and put that line in place that we're not responsible for that sits outside of council? That's all I had to say, really.
Thank you. Michelle, Steve, any comments on that?
I can pick that up. Probably agree with all of that sentiment, Nikki. Thank you. Although we may not look at a citizens' assembly as such, there may be something of that ilk. And you'll be pleased to know that we now have someone in the hot seat around climate change, holding the coordination role, who we've seconded out of infrastructure. So in general, agree with your comments. I can't comment on the last element that you raised. No, I don't know if that's something you wanted to pick up, Your Worship.
I think we've canvassed the task forces reasonably widely.
I think it's fair to note as well that this paper was written last week and things have moved on a little since then. So in terms of that structure around the steering group and the task forces, that's emergent at the moment.
Thanks, Michelle. Any further comments?
I was only just going to, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here with Pete, but in terms of procurement policy, Nikki, we've already begun discussions a few months back on how procurement might evolve to add resilience to the local economy is one thing that we're looking at, and certainly as part of those shovel-ready projects that went forward to CIP, the way in which we procure locally to support the construction effort around those projects is going to be evolved through there in terms of particularly looking at local contractors and local small to medium enterprises to support them.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, that's great.
Right, so we need to accept the report, note the report. Mover.
I'll move.
Thank you, Neve. Quentin, you're seconding. Right, Jane. Come in, Jane.
I don't know whether we have to vote, do we?
We do.
Okay, Councillor Gladding.
In favour.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yes.
Mayor Bolt.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Copeland.
Affirmative.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor McLeod.
Support and endorse Nikki's comments.
Councillor Miller is absent now. Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Clark.
Yes.
So that is carried unanimously.
Thank you. We move now to your Chief Executive's report, Mike. Off you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very small report this month. So just two items. One is to just acknowledge and confirm the fact that we are amending the steering group composition, and that so Prue has stepped down from that. Adrian Young-Cooper has come into the deputy role. She was already on the steering group, and QAC have nominated Simon Flood, who was a recently appointed director, to be added to that, and we just asked to note that change. And the second item really relates just to an amendment. It's something that we missed out some time ago when we set the terms of reference for the Wanaka Community Board delegations, and that's just to note that the Traffic and Parking Subcommittee, that matters that would, where those matters that would normally go to that committee relate to the Upper Clutha area or the Wanaka Ward area, they will be considered by the Wanaka Community Board. So that just needs to be confirmed as well.
Thank you, Mike. I'll move your report be accepted and noted. Seconded by. Thank you, Penny. Are we all happy if we just say, tell me if you disagree with voting yes on this? How about that? Save Jane the job. Nobody's telling me they disagree, therefore we'll say it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. That takes us through to public exclusion. I now move that we move into public excluded. Seconded by? Who was that?
Sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
Are you seconding it?
No, I'm actually going to oppose it.
I'll second it, Jim.
Thank you, John. Right, off you go, Jane.
Sorry, Nikki, can
Right.
you just clarify, are you opposing the item or opposing the
I'm
public excluded?
opposing moving into public excluded for the Cadrona item. We've got no visibility around it.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Excuse me, can I just clarify? There's actually two Cadrona items. Which
Sorry,
Cadrona
you're
item
right.
is-
Wastewater, Callum.
So what are we voting on now, Jane? Sorry.
We're voting to move into public excluded. Ferg.
In favour.
Councillor Lewis.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Gladding.
Opposed.
Mayor Bolt.
Yes.
Councillor Copeland.
Affirmative.
Councillor Clark.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor McLeod.
Yes.
And Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, I second it.
Okay, so the motion to exclude the public is carried.
All right. So Simon, can you please do your thing and make sure that we are alone?